How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
is the end. There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? Oh, I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. This is the final scene of I don't wanna get married. I don't wanna be just like you. Nobody bothered to ask me. They said I ought to be just like you. Well, I could get a marriage license for a husband and me, so I could use the death insurance for my HART. Since I can buy a taxi with the same gender spouse, I shouldn't feel so bad getting kicked out of my house. Don't send me a rainbow. Come on, 'cause never done shit for me. Don't want a seat at your table. A fucking invitation to your party. Wanna celebrate a game on your cable TV? Well, trans, lesbians are calling southern bodies stuff to eat. You paid the world for tea, up the shotguns and dick. Well, all the kids on the street are getting belted with whips. I don't wanna be equal, 'cause I know I'm fucking better than you. Your moderation is lethal. Get on my way, let me do what I need to. There's no protection that this nation's taking offer to me. Just solid wenches do this is my gay bourgeoisie. So fuck off with your evil South American flag. The only colors that I need are the pink and the black.
Unbelievable spy stream. It was so great. It was so awesome. Am I still muted? You guys can hear me, right? It's fixed? Yeah, it's fixed. Relax. Everyone's jumping the gun. I caught it. Okay. I am late because we had an epic, amazing spy stream right before this, and it just got done. It was 90 minutes long. I thought it was going to be an hour long, but it was turned out to be 90 minutes long. Okay, so that's why I'm late. And if you were not at this spy stream, I highly recommend catching the replay, which is Librarians Queering Literacy from the American Library Association. The librarians are back, and they're talking about all the ways in which they're going to queer the library. And I have a whole bunch of resources on my desktop right now that came up in this presentation that I'm going to be looking through when I have a moment. But it was a great spy stream. And how you get access to spy stream, we've already done, 2 or 3? This is like the 3rd spy stream this week. Spy stream is when we go inside a live leftist training and we watch it happen live and we see all the crazy stuff that they say when they think they're only talking to each other. And it was amazing. So conservatives on Twitter were reading about this presentation. The most ironic part of this presentation is earlier this week, conservatives on Twitter and James Lindsay and all this stuff were reading about this presentation and they were complaining about it and they were sharing it all over the place. I will bet you money that I am the only actual person that signed up for the presentation and went to the presentation. Like all these people that were complaining on Twitter about the American Library Association queering literacy, they were all talking about it in the open. Guess what? It was a public presentation. You could have signed up for it and watched it, but you didn't want to do that. You just wanted to whine and complain on Twitter. So I did it. I signed up for it. I recorded the whole thing. It was great. And spy streams are a supporter exclusive that I do with members of my community. In order to get access to spy stream, you have to be a supporter on either my main Substack, my locals, my Patreon, Twitter subscriber, or YouTube channel member. And if you are a supporter on one of those platforms, you get access to spy stream when I do them. Always keep an eye on announcements and stuff like that. I highly recommend, even if you're not supporting my work on the Substack, make sure you have a free subscription to it, because Substack is like one of the places when I announce when we're doing a spy stream. It's probably the best place to do it because you get an email update and all that good stuff. Oftentimes I send out these updates pretty close to the stream because I don't want to try to jinx it in terms of like people knowing what we're doing and stuff like that. And so make sure you're signed up at least on one of those platforms and make sure you're paying attention. I do announcements also in the Telegram group. I do announcements on my Twitter. You can join us live anytime. If you're not able to join us live, you can always catch the replay on demand. And again, this is for supporters, so you guys fund the work I'm doing. I really, really, really appreciate it. And it was a great one. And so more to come on that soon. But today we are going to be watching at least one presentation, maybe another one too, just depending on how it goes. I want to learn more. This is a Karlyn needs to educate herself stream. And if I have to educate myself, you all have to do it too. But the thing of it is we know that queer Marxists, and this is Queer Marxism Month. Welcome to Queer Marxism Month on the channel. We know that queer Marxists are obsessed with Freud. They're obsessed with psychoanalytics. Many of them are they're psychoanalytical therapists or whatever. They do psychoanalysis. And I've never quite understood the Marxist/socialist obsession with Freud, because they talk about psychoanalytics and Freud like all the time. Also, I didn't really like, I know I have a PhD in psychology. Okay, I know. But just because you have a PhD in something doesn't mean you study every single thing related to that topic. And I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. Okay, there was no reason for me to study Freud because I don't like Freud. I've never had a good feeling about Freud. And so I personally just avoided Freud like the plague. I just didn't want to deal with it. And so I successfully avoided studying Freud or psychoanalysis during my PhD because I didn't need to. And so I need to educate myself about what is going on. And I'm very grateful to you guys because many of you sent me presentations to watch today, but special shout out to Daniel. Daniel sent me a whole list of presentations and he gave me reviews and he told me what they were good for. He like pre-screened the presentations. And so major shout out to Daniel. That was extremely helpful. And I picked out a couple presentations from the ones he sent me. And again, that's not to say the presentations that other people sent me were bad. It's just like, decisions have to be made. And this is where I decided to start. We've got psychoanalysis, gender, and sexualities. Daniel said this had a lot of queer Marxism in it, so I trust him. From a YouTube channel called Psychoanalytic Thinking. And then we also have Marx and psychoanalysis. A little bit on the nose there. Now, this one is from the UK. So that's why I put it second. And we're going to kind of see. We're going to watch this one first about gender and sexuality. And we're going to start there. This is an hour and a half long. And then we're just going to see where we are. I really want to maybe not be streaming all night, but we'll see where we are. And we might end up watching this one too. And we're just going to see how it goes. So this is a Karlyn is Educating Herself Day about psychoanalysis and Freud and why queer Marxists are obsessed with psychoanalysis. Now, the reason we're doing this is for some reason, there have just been a lot of Freudian themes that have come up this week. So it's kind of like I pay attention to these things. It's like the universe is sending me a series of signs. And the universe has pointed me back to a documentary that I tried to watch last year with someone who was being overtly antagonistic to me on my own channel. But I tried to watch The Century of the Self last year. Never quite made it all the way through because, well, there was someone being aggressive towards me on the internet. And so, but we're putting that behind us. We're not mad about that anymore. And I want to revisit The Century of the Self, and I want to actually watch the whole effing thing. And The Century of the Self it has a lot of Freud in it. And so one of the things I was struggling with when I was trying to watch it last year is when I watch things like that, I'm trying to always understand, how does this overlap with the left? How does this overlap with the far left in America and stuff like that? And I think I need to understand more about psychoanalysis and Freud in order to maybe get the most out of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch The Century of the Self tomorrow. I'm just going to try to watch the whole thing because I feel like this is one of those things where, yeah, it's a long 4-part thing. I understand that. But I feel like this is one of those things where I'm doing it by myself now. I don't have someone who is not necessarily playing nicely to distract us. And I can just watch it and I can get out of it what I want to get out of it. And I can do the type of analysis that I want to do on it. And I think it'll be interesting. And Reagan, this is a very good point. I will have beer tomorrow because tomorrow is Friday. Tomorrow is happy hour. And so we're gonna kick back and we're gonna watch The Century. I just had a major slime-related avalanche on my... Did you guys hear the slime-related avalanche? I had a whole fuck-off pile of slime on my desk over here, and it all just came down. All the slime just fell down. No! It's all gone. It's all on the floor. It was a tower. It was a pile. It was a tower. It was literally like the tower card. If you guys could only see, I have several piles of slime over here. No, it wasn't. Well, there were some papers. It brought down everything. It brought down everything. You know what? This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to get rid of some of my older slimes that have been sitting on the bottom of the pile. But don't worry. Don't worry, everything's okay. My knitting is still here. Nothing got harmed in the great slime avalanche of 2025. All right, we'll deal with that problem later. So we're gonna learn about psychoanalysis and Freud, and then we're gonna watch The Century of the Self tomorrow, and I'm gonna drink, and it's gonna be great, and that's just what we're gonna do. And I know it's a long movie, but you know what? It'll be fine. All right. I watched a 6-hour episode of the Whatever podcast last Friday. It took 9 hours. I had 5 beers on that stream. It'll be fine. It's chill. No, Donnie, I'm nowhere near done my knitting yet, but I'm making progress. I mean, shawls take a long time. Shawls take anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks for me to make, depending on the size of the shawl. So knitting takes a while. It can be slow. And if I make a mistake, I have to tear something out. It takes even longer. Now, before we get into this today, I would be remiss if we didn't just spend a few moments on the breakup of Trump and Elon Musk. It's over, guys. It's over. They broke up. The bromance is over. Trump and Elon Musk are no longer best friends. And you know, we're all upset about this. I'm actually not upset at all. I'm not upset at all. I'm not upset at all. I'm glad that Elon Musk is seeing what's really going on. I'm glad that Elon Musk is finally starting to realize that the Republican Party and conservatives are a bunch of insane narrative-driven political shills that only care about status and money and all that stuff. I am not upset at all. I think this is fucking hilarious. This is like some of the greatest entertainment that has ever been. So just to bring everyone up to speed, just in case you aren't on Twitter all the time like I am, we've got Drama Alert here, has put together a little bit of a timeline for us. It's not a complete timeline, but we're going to work with it. So last week, Elon Musk announced that his time as a government employee is over. And I know Elon was very upset about this because he felt like nothing he did had mattered. And he went back to his private life. Well, then, yesterday, Elon Musk announces on Twitter that he cannot support Trump's stupid budget bill that's going to massively, massively, massively inflate the deficit. And Elon Musk is like, Trump, this is stupid. This bill sucks. And he you know, and I remember that moment when you finally, I remember being in a similar position where when I was like trying to work with the Republicans and trying to work with the conservatives, and they were just doing bullshit thing after bullshit thing. And then finally you say, you guys are being a bunch of retards. Let me tell you why. And then conservatives lose their fucking mind because, you're speaking against Trump. You're saying things we don't want to hear. So Elon finally lost it. And he was like, fuck you guys. The bill sucks. And then Trump made a statement in the Oval Office.
But if they picked him, I would have won Pennsylvania. I won it by a lot. But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem. And he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate because that's billions and billions of dollars. And it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have a gasoline, combustion. We want to have different. We want to have hybrids. We want to have we want to be able to sell everything. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, it became a little bit different. And I can understand that. But he knew every aspect of this bill. He knew it better than almost anybody. And he never had a problem until right after he left. And if you saw the statements he made about me, which I'm sure you can get very easily, it's very fresh on tape, he said the most beautiful things about me. And he hasn't said bad about me personally, but I'm sure that'll be next. But I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
Mr. President, I just want to clarify, did he raise any of these concerns with you privately before he raised them publicly? And this is the guy.
So essentially what happened is, here's what I think happened. Elon was trying to keep the peace, and he was trying not to be a dick, and he was trying to be the bigger person. This is the mistake that people make when they first start working with the conservatives and they get Elon, I went through exactly the same thing as Elon did, man. When I got love bombed by conservatives for a full year and they lifted me up as like the Democrat who left, the knitting Democrat, all that bullshit. I got love bombed, and like even after kind of like the election and all that stuff, I was still just trying to keep the peace with conservatives and Republicans, even though they were doing bullshit things. And it's like, you kind of just don't want to rock the boat. You're like, okay, well, you guys are still maybe marginally better than the left, maybe. And so I understand exactly what Elon Musk was doing. Elon Musk was like, deuces, fuck you guys. I did exactly the same thing, by the way, when I after the 2020 election, I said, okay, Republicans, we're breaking up now. Okay, I'm going to go over here now. We're breaking up. We're not together anymore. We're breaking up. but you don't want to be like you want to be the bigger person, right? So you just don't say anything. So now Trump is like, Elon never said anything about this because he was trying to be the bigger person and he didn't want to upset Trump and he didn't want to create a whole kerfuffle. And then he changed his mind. And now Trump is like, and now Trump is trying to use it against him and saying, the only reason you're doing this is because I took away your subsidies, Elon. And then Elon said, false. The bill was never shown to me even once and was passed in the dead of night so fast that almost no one in Congress could read it. Yep, true. And then Elon started posting tweets from like conservative politicians talking about how they would never do this years ago. And oh, here they are doing it with this stupid bill. And then Elon said, without me, Trump would have lost the election. Democrats would control the House and Republicans would be 51-49 in the Senate. And then he said Trump is showing such ingratitude, which is correct. Again, Elon has this clocked perfectly. I had exactly the same experience on a much smaller scale, of course, but like the behavior is the same, where you've kept your mouth shut for a long time. You tried to play along. You helped out. You gave everything that you could and more, and it still wasn't fucking appreciated. I had exactly the same experience with the right. And eventually you go, you know what, assholes? I'm going to start talking about what I want to talk about. Elon is doing exactly the same thing. And he's having exactly the same emotional reaction that I had to it when it happened to me, which is like, I went out of my way for you. I, in the case of Elon Musk, gave you $250 million. I've staked my entire reputation on you, asshole, and you guys can't even get one thing right. Such ingratitude. And he's absolutely correct. Elon Musk is 100% right. They are completely ungrateful for everything that he did. And I don't necessarily agree with everything that Elon did, but I agree that they're being ungrateful 100%. And then Elon said, keep the EV solar incentive cuts in the bill. Also cut all the crazy spending increases in the big ugly bill so that America doesn't go bankrupt. I think that sounds actually like a really good idea. And then Elon said to kill the bill. He called for the reconciliation bill to be killed in the Senate. And then Elon posted a poll saying, is it time to create a new political party in America that actually represents 80% in the middle? Well, Elon Musk hasn't learned about ballot access laws yet. He'll get there next. Elon is going through a process right now of understanding the sheer volume of ways in which our political system is completely fucked. He thought he understood the political system in the election. No. He never did. And I said this at the time. I was like, Elon's going to keep red pilling. It's going to get worse because he never really understood it. So he also doesn't understand that it's not really feasible to make a third party work in this country because of ballot access laws that are controlled by Republicans and Democrats that make it damn near effing impossible for a political party to actually function, a third party. But he'll learn that. And now Trump has apparently said that Elon has Trump derangement syndrome.
Things are happening in this room, and I'll tell you, he's not the first. People leave my administration and they love us, and then at some point they miss it so badly, and some of them embrace it and some of them actually become hostile. I don't know what it is. It's sort of Trump derangement syndrome, I guess they call it, but we have it with others too. They leave and they wake up in the morning and the glamour's gone, the whole world is different, and they become hostile. I don't know what it is. Someday you'll write a book about it and you'll let us know. Yeah. Things are happening.
As a reminder, Trump wants to say that the glamour is gone for Elon Musk. As a reminder, Elon Musk's personal wealth dwarfs Trump's wealth. Elon Musk is like, how much richer is Elon Musk than Donald Trump? Elon Musk is infinitely richer than Donald Trump. If Elon Musk wants there to be luxury and glamour in his life, I promise you he can have that. Like it's not like a regular person. It's not just like a staffer leaving the Trump administration where the staffer kind of goes back to normal life and people don't really know who they are and they don't have access to things anymore. It's like Elon Musk can have access literally to whatever he wants. He can have anything. He can print money. And it's like, yeah. Trump is the one that's losing the charm on this one, isn't he? And I think we all know it. It doesn't make sense. Elon will never have glamour in his life again. Elon Musk is one of the richest people in the world. He can have glamour in his life if he wants to. And then Trump made multiple posts on Truth Social. He said Elon was wearing thin. I asked him to leave. I took away his EV mandate that forced everyone to buy electric cars that no one else wanted. Yeah, no one wants Teslas. Okay. That he knew for months I was going to do, and he just went crazy. Where have I heard this before? Where have I heard the conservative line? They're not following the narrative. They're literally insane. They're psychopathic. They're narcissistic. They're crazy. Where have I heard that before? Every single time someone refuses to follow the conservative shill narrative. They just went crazy, okay? Just trust me. Pinky swear, trust me, bro. They are crazy, and that's why they're not following our narrative. Okay, Trump. All right. And then Trump said, the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's government subsidies and contracts. I was always surprised Biden didn't do it. So am I sniffing glue? Is Trump weaponizing the federal government because Elon Musk made posts on Twitter that Trump doesn't like? Wasn't one of the whole things that they had a problem with the Democrats about was that the Democrats were weaponizing the government and weaponizing the courts against their political enemies? And now Elon on Twitter is like, Trump, we're breaking up. And Trump is like, oh yeah, I'm going to weaponize the entire federal government against you, asshole. It's like, it's almost like they never stood for anything at all. It's almost like it never really mattered. And then, and this is like one of the best ones. Then Elon Musk tweeted, time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That's the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day. Mark this post for the future. The truth will come out. So, and I like, you can hear the middle finger. It's like, obviously there's not a middle finger in the post, but like you can be like, fuck you, Trump, fuck you. And then Trump responded on Truth Social, and he said, I don't mind Elon turning against me, as he should have done so much. Oh, excuse me, let me read that again. I don't mind Elon turning against me, but he should have done so months ago. This is one of the greatest bills ever presented to Congress. Okay, Trump. Yeah, okay. Keep telling yourself that. It's a record cut in expenses, $1.6 trillion, and the biggest tax cut ever given. If the bill doesn't pass, there will be a 68% tax increase, and things are worse than that. I didn't create this mess. I'm just here to fix it. This puts our country on a path to greatness. Make America great again. Well, Trump, if it's so great, then why don't you just break it down into its component parts? And just pass everything as a single issue bill. If it's so great and it's so necessary, then why not just do a line item thing where everyone votes on one singular part of the bill at a time so that people can actually read it and actually know what you're voting for and voting against? Maybe if it's so important, you have the entire resources of the government. Maybe if it's so important that this bill get passed, you break it into its component parts and you pass it like that. How about you do that? Why don't you do that? And then Elon tweeted, in light of the president's statement about cancellation of government contracts, SpaceX will immediately begin decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately. And that's all that Drama Alerts has. But then that little fucking Malaysian troll, Ian Miles Chung, starts tweeting about impeachment. And he said, President versus Elon, who wins? My money's on Elon. Trump should be impeached and JD Vance should replace him. And Elon Musk retweeted that and said yes. So now Elon Musk is literally calling for Trump to be impeached and replaced by JD Vance. Hello, Palantir. And then Trump apparently got really pissy. And he said, we are going to have a private phone call later. Listen.
Yes. We're going to have a little discussion now, very private. And I just want to thank you all for being here. And thank you very much, media. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, any response to Elon Musk claiming about the Epstein files?
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Good job.
So you can see Trump looks real happy there. He looks really thrilled. Trump is like, we're going to have a discussion in private, Elon. And that's where we are with the great Trump-Elon feud of 2025. Let me see if there's been any updates. Actually, let's just pull up Elon Musk's Twitter feed and we can just see. Have there been any? I know Elon's been tweeting still. Let's see. He's retweeting people. Oh, look, he's retweeting a video of Trump with Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, gosh. Well, listen. I don't think Elon Musk is a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination. I'm 1,000% on Elon Musk's side, though. I want Elon Musk to use this opportunity to red pill even further because, like, the first red pill, there are many, many layers to the red pill process, okay? There are many layers. The first layer for me, and I think for Elon as well, because we have followed similar trajectories at different scales, of course, but similar trajectories in that the first red pill you take when you leave the left is you realize that everyone on the left that you've ever trusted to tell you the truth has lied to you. It's really fun. It's a process to go through that. And then you go over to the conservatives, and the conservatives are like, we love you. We're the Big Ten. Come play with us. And you feel the love and you feel the hatred for the left that you have because you've just been personally betrayed by the left. And so then you start hanging around with the conservatives and they love bomb you all the time. And as long as you're saying the things that they want you to say, they lift you up and they love you and all this stuff. And then the minute that you question them, they turn on you like a pack of fucking rabid hyenas. And that's when you go, did any of you ever actually really care about any of this, or was it all just bullshit from the beginning? Because once you identify the problem once you're on the left and you look at your own side and you're like, you assholes don't believe anything that you say. Once you identify that problem once, it becomes easier to identify it. So people try to give me shit online. They're like, you leave every group you're a part of. Well, first of all, that's not entirely true. Secondly, the reason that I leave groups so quickly now is the minute that I identify that something is wrong, I'm like, deuces, I'm out. I'm not playing this game. I'm not doing this bullshit. Because the right does exactly the same thing that the left does. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And so Elon is now going to get resoundingly attacked by everyone. I saw earlier, Steve Bannon called for Elon Musk's deportation earlier. I was like, oh, here we go. Here we go. And now Elon's going to see who the conservatives really are and how they actually behave. And he's not going to like it. And I'll bet you anything, that pushes him farther right, which is exactly where I want Elon Musk to be. I want Elon Musk to come to the far right. I want Elon Musk to come to the camp of everyone sucks and we need some really dramatic changes in this country, like really fucking dramatic. I don't want Elon Musk in the same place as Trump. Trump is a fucking Democrat. He is. Whether you guys want to hear it or not, Trump is a Democrat. I want Elon Musk. I am a very far right person, personally. I want Elon Musk as far right as we can possibly get him. And this is the way to get him there. So I'm thrilled. I think this is great. I think this is awesome. I am fully behind Elon in this battle, and I would, Groiper Elon. Elon Musk is going to start listening to Nick Fuentes and being like, oh, they lied about Nick Fuentes. Can you imagine the revelation that Elon Musk has when he realizes that they lied about Nick Fuentes? It's going to be great. It's going to be wild. Nick has got to figure out a way to get in front of him now. This is Nick Fuentes' challenge. Nick Fuentes is going to be like, I tried to tell you. I'm not what they said I was either. What they did to me, they're doing to you now, bro. And I hope he does. It's Nick's time to shine. Nick needs to swoop in there and be like, let's sit down. Let's sit down. Wouldn't that be glorious? It would be glorious. I think so. Anyway, guys, that is all I have to say about that. I'm obviously going to keep watching this because it's entertaining AF. But right now we need to we need to learn about psychoanalytics. So we're going to turn our attention to something serious. As a reminder, if you want to support the work I'm doing, please head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Sign up for a membership, $8 a month, $88 a year. You get access to supporter perks like Spy Stream. You get access to my supporter Discord. You get access to private Zoom calls that I do with my community. And I really appreciate it because I'm 100% funded by you. I don't take political money from anyone. I don't take money from any politically driven organization. My only job is to show up and to tell you the truth and to show you the receipts. That's what we do at Spy Stream. I don't do commentary on Spy Stream. I literally just show you what's happening live on the internet, and you can see for yourself and you can decide what you think about it. My work is only made possible by people like you who sign up on the Substack and in other places as well if they want to. $8 a month, $80 a year, and I really do appreciate it. You guys keep me in business. Also, I want to remind everyone, I want to remind everyone that Alice in Queerland is out. Alice in Queerland is my new book that I just published in honor of Pride Month. It is a darkly satirical reimagining of the classic Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, except Alice gets pulled down the DEI rabbit hole into the land of queer, where she has to undergo sensitivity training and she has to undergo non-binary identity training. And then she gets struggle sessioned by a group of TikTok influencers. And then she goes to the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, which is really an academic cancel mob. And then she goes to meet the Queen of Hearts. And the Queen of Hearts is a drag queen that's literally executing people if they lose the struggle session. And Alice meets the White Rabbit, and the Cheshire Cat has a very prominent role, and he's there guiding Alice through the entire adventure through Queerland. And it's really great, and I had a really fun time writing it. And someone asked me earlier today, is this appropriate for kids? Yes, it actually is. It is appropriate for kids. Now, it's not necessarily a children's book. It's an adult satire. It's a dark satire. But there's nothing inappropriate in it. There's no language. There's no sex. There's no none of that. But there is a lot of queer ideology. I don't necessarily think kids would understand this book if I'm honest about it. But I really wrote it for adults that just hate all of this stuff and you want to see it just mocked relentlessly in like a really kind of like aggressive but also kind of light and funny way. I had a ton of fun writing this book. I hope people appreciate it. If you read it, leave a review on Amazon. I literally just added it to Amazon on a whim the other day when I finished it, so there's no reviews yet. You can be the first to leave a review. I would really appreciate it. And if you want to pick up other books that I've written, you can head over to redmenacepress.com. We've got A Brief History of Racism. We've got Debunking the Communist Manifesto. We have my Communist Manifesto Dystopian Fairy Tale. We have an actual copy. I went on a Communist Manifesto binge, all right? That one is an actual copy of the Communist Manifesto. Then we got Alice in Queerland. I still have more books that I'm working on this year, and you can always find out what I'm writing about and get the latest link to buy my books, which also does support the work I'm doing over at redmenacepress.com, and I really appreciate it. All right, let's dig in. Let's dig in, shall we? Get the sound set up. Guys, please mount the like button if you would be so kind. I would like to encourage everyone as we are making our way through this presentation, if you have comments about it, if you have observations, please make sure you put them in the chat so we can all learn together. Again, this is a topic that's relatively new to me. So I'm going to be learning it alongside all of you. And I think it's going to be helpful. And I think it's going to be helpful for us to understand what's going on. Oh, I missed a super chat. Thank you, Naruto. The other day I saw a Rise Against tweets and my alarm bells going off. This is Marxism. They're queer Marxists. I was one of the few that knew. Yep, Rise Against are queer Marxist. Indeed, they are. It's very disappointing. Their music used to be good and now it sucks. And it just is what it is. So we move on. We appreciate the things that they gave us that we like, and then we move on with the rest. All right, guys, as we were making our way through this, please make sure you put your observations in the chat, and we're just going to learn some stuff. This is Psychoanalysis, Gender, and Sexualities.
Okay, welcome everybody. Tonight, we're lucky to have Patricia and Manya, who are going to introduce us to their new book, Psychoanalysis, Gender and Sexualities, from Feminism to Trans. It's much appreciated. We did an introduction to you in the preamble, but I just still want to just do a brief introduction. And again, Patricia and Manya, thank you very much for your time and generously sharing with us. So we know Patricia, we've had a couple of talks with her this year. We've been very lucky. Thank you, Patricia. Patricia is a psychoanalyst and analytics supervisor. She's a multiple award-winning author who has authored or edited 7 books, including Please Select Your Gender, Transgender Psychoanalysis, and Psychoanalysis in the Barrios, Race, Class, and the Unconscious. And then today, this book that she'll be presenting. Manya is a psychoanalyst and professor of English. She has co-edited with Jessica Datema, Revisioning War Trauma in Cinema, and with Vanessa Sinclair on Violence and Psychoanalysis, and with Patricia Lacan, Psychoanalysis and Comedy, and also Madness, Yes You Can't, Lacan on Madness. So we're very privileged and grateful, and I'm going to hand over to you, and then at the end we're going to, if people have questions, we'll have some time for questions. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. It's a great pleasure to be here with Manya, my partner in crime. This is our third book. We have worked together. We did Lacan on Madness, Lacan on Comedy, and now we are happy to introduce to you this just off the presses book. Just came out here. I have a fresh copy of hot from the presses. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me.
I thought that person was
excited
trans.
to hear the South African accent, which as we of course all love in New York. Yeah. Patricia, do you want to say something about how our book came to being, and then we can start our presentation?
Well, maybe we could delve into the book. I think the book would speak for itself. So,
all right. Well, we're going to read a little bit from our introduction and maybe like discuss as we read, so that it doesn't feel like we're just reading at you. Okay, so one moment. Okay, so this book examines the historical intersections between psychoanalysis, feminism, and trans discourse, taking note of their important contributions in the 20th century in order to examine our moment in which heterosexist normative assumptions have been put into question.
Oh, yeah?
Insofar as it denaturalizes sex in terms of culture and history and problematizes gender as unstable and conflicted, psychoanalysis allows us to reconsider patriarchal and heterosexist forms of cultural and ideological domination. Furthermore, psychoanalysis goes beyond the gender-sex binary. because neither biology nor culture alone can fully account for either sex or gender.
Oh, yeah? Biology and culture can't account for sex and gender. That sounds deeply queer Marxist, doesn't it?
Instead, our sexual being results from a combination of the two, and we have an unruly surplus that exceeds both of them. This bridging of mind and body.
What the fuck is that? What is that? Does this person have some sort of rope thing? Hang on.
Both.
Is this person one of those? Remember when we watched the queer rope workshop? Does this person have a queer rope thing in there? Do they get tied up? Is that what that is? See, it all comes together. Every time. Wow, she accidentally showed us her bondage gear. Okay.
Of them. This bridging of mind and body.
Oh, is that like a workout thing, or is that a sex thing? I don't know what that is. I want to think that she accidentally just showed us her workout, her bondage gear. I want to. What is it? What is it? Explain yourselves. I don't know what this is. Is it like a workout thing? Okay, you see, you guys ruined the fun. We could have said that this was like a queer sex thing or something like that, and it's just a home workout thing. Okay, fine.
As well as the fact that they are never coterminous, is specific to psychoanalysis, whose theoretical understanding has long-lasting historical impacts. In our collection, we weave feminism, psychoanalysis, and trans discourses to launch conversations and new possibilities.
Our point of departure was to try to rethink the last 3 decades. More than 30 years ago, there was a big change ignited by the amazing contribution of Judith Butler. They proposed a new way of thinking about gender that
a major change proposed by Judith Butler, you don't say. Does someone want to tell the New School of Florida and Christopher Rufo that, please? Because they don't seem to think that Judith Butler is very influential in queer Marxism.
They propose a new way of thinking about gender that blazed across global academia. Butler provided a critical reading of psychoanalysis that not only challenge and help psychoanalysis update itself, but also radically change the way people talk about sex and gender. And they did this quite simply by positing a performative concept of gender, meaning that gender is enacted at will. And this proposition divorces sexuality from any essentialist foundation. If gender was constructed as Butler asserted, could it be constructed differently? Or did social conditions impose some sort of determinism? Did construction offer the possibility of agency and transformation? This refers to the impossibility of a grammatically denoted substance that would correspond to with the word like feminine, as defined by grammar. The feminine sex becomes a point of linguistic absence, and this is how, thanks to the contribution of Butler, the notion of gender loses consistency, is liberated, and it becomes pluralized. This position also questions, and this is an important place of overlap with psychoanalysis, this sex-gender divide, and rejects the idea of a compulsory heterosexuality, not only then gender, but also sex become constructions performatives.
Butler's impact on feminism was huge and was relayed by a large audience who appreciated their forceful reformulation of the links between bodies and gender. So much so that this new vision of Butler's exceeded the feminist base. However, when the transgender movement became more visible a few years later, one of its fundamental claims was to challenge the notion that the physical dimension of gender was inconsequential. The trans postulation foregrounded the aspect of embodiment and reclaimed the body as sexed, rejecting the notion of a simple parody or performance of gender. So we have sketched a kind
interesting.
of bare bones history of the early intersections and debates. More than 3 decades later, we felt the need to revisit this heated controversy because we believe that psychoanalysis has a key role to play in it. Above all, psychoanalysis always positions itself at the intersection between body and discourse. As both practicing psychoanalysts, our interest is not to provide an official history of these complex movements. Our main interest, rather, is to propose a hypothesis of cross-pollination. Of everyone, of all of these discourses, like pollinating each other, having sex, right? Feminism, psychoanalysis, and trans discourse, to launch a conversation without suspicion or exclusion. This is the shared aspiration as well of the contributors to the collection. The effort to discuss gender and sexuality from a psychoanalytic perspective reveals a foundational interrelatedness that we shouldn't overlook. In the last 20 years, we believed that I don't know if you have this in South Africa as well, but there's this kind of strong, we're in the post-gender age. We're no longer in the binary. It's agender. We're in gender fluidity. And some even said that we were living in the times of post-sexuality. Younger generations were putting off becoming sexually active or renouncing sex altogether, becoming asexuals. Statistics seem to confirm that we're having a cross-generational sex recession.
Yes, but maybe as maybe there was a little rush in announcing maybe the death of gender, sex, and even psychoanalysis, because still we can prove in our clinical practice that Freud's theories that have transformed our conceptions of subjective agency as well as gender and sex continue to confirm, not only in the social context, we could treat the popular culture as we could treat the discourse of an analysis, and that we can observe that in our clinical practice, that in human sexuality, there is nothing natural, that human sexuality has little to do with having babies or any biological programming, that often sexuality has even very little to do with pleasure. Freud discovered, for instance, that neurotic symptoms presented an enigma whose answer concealed not just a memory of a traumatic erotic encounter or a primal sin, but a repressed wish. Freud revealed, therefore, the unconscious power of something besides pleasure, positing that sex is not just pleasurable, but also traumatic and potentially destructive, that psychic repression is an intrinsically failed system. The sexual drive emerges in the form of a symptom, offering the same subversive satisfaction that occasioned its initial repression.
Lacan shows us that the sexual drive
that's like the third time this
satisfied
week we
then,
talked about
both
Lacan.
in and out of bed. The point is that even if we manage to get away from sex, we don't.
Wait, what did Lacan say? I shouted over it.
In the form of a symptom, offering the same subversive satisfaction that occasioned its initial repression.
Lacan shows us that the sexual drive is satisfied then, both in and out of bed. The point is that even if we manage to get away from sex, we don't manage to get away from sex. Abstinence is sexual. Lo and behold, sex is problematic and excessive, even if we're not having any. Okay, so
wow.
Freud explained this excess in human sexuality by differentiating instinct and drive. The notion of drive lies at the limit of the organic and the inorganic, a liminal concept that accounts for the intersection between organism and psyche, life and death, body and language. The notion of the drive as a limit concept also accounts for the fault innate in the pleasure principle, pointing to the beyond, but also to language, to the linguistic environment of the pleasure principle. The drive emerges at the intersection of language and flesh, a convergence that Freud detected in the formation of hysterical symptoms. Freud's drive theory debunks the binary of heteronormativity and any illusion of sexual normalcy. Freud conceives of the sexual drive as fundamentally bisexual and intrinsically queer, as Christopher Lane and Tim Dean have shown. This constitutional queerness of psychoanalysis has been...
Freud believes that the sex drive is intrinsically queer. It's all coming together now, doesn't it?
And Tim Dean have shown. This constitutional queerness of psychoanalysis has been productively developed. Using the critical tools of psychoanalysis, queer studies have shown that at the level of the sexual drive, there is no predetermined object or gender, and consequently no prescriptive norm. This potential freedom of the drive, a freedom which is also its doom, does not sit well with the public, or even with many psychoanalysts. Institutionally, psychoanalysis would often address this reality through the lens of conservative values, going against the grain of psychoanalysis foundations, but its theory has nevertheless been at the root of many trenchant critiques of the dominant hetero-patriarchal culture.
While Freud never grappled with gender directly, he clearly problematized human sexuality when he talked about sexual difference as the psychical consequence of the child's discovery of the anatomical distinction between the sexes. Even though Freud's works on infantile sexuality appears to describe a progression from childhood latency to adult sexual activity, he nevertheless proposes a non-linear evolution, as it is made clear even by the most cursory reading of the famous case studies. Lacanian psychoanalysis adds a new term to recapture the magnitude and radicality of the Freudian discovery. And this could be summed up when Lacan introduces his own term. He talks about sexuation, and we propose formulas of sexuation that could perhaps be read as reinstating a binary. There are two sides in the formula of sexuation, but this formula can also be read as proposing a matrix of modes of sexual positioning that are mobile, that are positionings that can be read as denoting the fluctuating relation, describing the process by which any subject becomes embodied and sex in the encounter with language, offering therefore an original contribution to feminist, queer, and trans discourses on sex, gender, sexual identity, sexual orientation, and performativity. Furthermore, as we said earlier, psychoanalysis goes beyond the sex-gender binary and highlighting that is neither sex nor gender, that there is an excess in the combination of these two, an unruly surplus that exists them, that this bridging of mind and body, as well as the fact that they are never coterminous, is specific to psychoanalysis, whose theoretical understanding has had long-lasting historical impacts. Feminist thinking has contributed to psychoanalysis, needed corrections, bringing an important contribution in terms of sexist patriarchal notions that had led psychoanalysis away from its initial discoveries. Some feminists have rejected psychoanalysis altogether, but many have read psychoanalysis critically and productively to challenge traditional notions of gender and sex. Feminist readers have reinvigorated the power of psychoanalytic theory, and psychoanalysis has offered feminism a theoretical basis for a non-essentialist understanding of gender and sexuality. Psychoanalysis' generalized attack on biological identity that problematize gender, sex, and embodiment energizes discourse like queer and also trans discourses. The contributions of psychoanalysis have clearly influenced feminism, queer studies, and what Susan Stryker calls its evil twin, trans studies. However,
we know who Susan Stryker is.
Extensive bibliography on gender has rarely addressed the intersections, and this is what our book tries to do, and is the intersections between psychoanalysis, feminism understood here as a social movement, a theory, and a political discourse against gender oppression and transgender discourses. It's in this intersection that our collection will work, trying to open up a conversation to.
The connection between transgender discourse and psychoanalysis.
I found this on the. Sorry.
Has a contentious history of resistance and acceptance. The link goes back to the very.
Hang on. This is a great tip. There's a channel called Red Clinic for Communist Psycho. Really? Thank you, Emma. I appreciate the pro tip. We'll look into that.
Very beginning of both movements, when there was the short-lived but close collaboration between Sigmund Freud and the other Einstein of sex, Magnus Hirschfeld. One of our authors in the collection, Sheila Kavanaugh, argued.
Do you think we're communists? Are you confused where you are? Oh, wait, no. Are you confused where you are? Sigmund Freud collaborated with Magnus Hirschfeld. That's interesting.
Collaboration between Sigmund Freud and the other Einstein of sex, Magnus Hirschfeld.
Yeah, okay.
One of our authors in the collection, Sheila Kavanaugh, argues for a transgender turn in psychoanalysis in her introduction to the special issue of Transgender Studies Quarterly. Regarding
Transgender Studies Quarterly?
Psychoanalytics, she claims that there are more grounds for critical collaboration than there are for opposition. This promising development regards the trans experience as an invitation to think beyond the normative bigender Oedipal phallic landscapes.
Okay.
We have structured our collection with three sections. The first is the genealogy of sex and gender. The second is queering psychoanalysis, fantasy, anthropology, and libidinal economy. And the third, being and becoming trans. And we have trans with an asterisk, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, talk about that.
Organization of the book sets up a progression from discussions of foundational discourses to queer resistance, to normative modes of thinking, to current trans debates.
I feel like I'm being fucking punked right now. I feel like this can't be fucking real. I feel like, okay, if you guys read my Alice in Queerland book, this is what the Alice in Queerland book is like. People who have read it or read an early draft of it, you guys can testify. This is what the Alice in Queerland book is like. With all of this language just thrown together as though it makes sense to everyone. But it doesn't make sense, and they're all making it up because it's not real.
We've chosen to include the asterisks next to trans, both as a symbol of multiplication and as a pointer to an annotation or a footnote. In this context, it is used as a diacritical placeholder for a myriad of gender possibilities.
Right, because it doesn't mean
transition.
transition.
Not to apply psychoanalysis to trans studies, but to encourage mutual transformation and dynamic interaction.
What? They literally put an asterisk next to trans to encourage Mutual transformation. What have I told you guys? Queer Marxists, when they say the word trans, they don't mean transition. They mean transform. I wonder where they got that idea. Hello, Freud. This is all Freud's fault. This is all Freud's fault.
Gender is a formation that involves designations of sameness and difference. While gender, as currently understood, is the socially constructed meaning designating difference between the sexes, sexuality is often situated closer to the body, a body that is marked by class, race, ethnicity, nationality, and transnational movements. In everyday vernacular, at least that's very common in the linguistic context of the United States, the word gender is used to determine whether we experience ourselves as male or female or as something else altogether, and is thought to encompass a vast range of identitary possibilities and evolving conviction about oneself. When we think of gender, it is often assumed that it means an identity issue, the expression of an inner truth. This usage is a derivation of a contribution of a psychoanalyst, Robert Stoller, who proposed the idea of a core sense of gender identification, the notion of a self located somewhere in the gender continuum, or as we would say today, even outside of it.
In the United States in particular, we're expected to declare some sort of identity in order to exist in society. And this identity is often gendered. At the same time, identitary claims that buttress notions of self and social representation often actually collide with subjective experience. This can be explained by way of the psychoanalytic premise that the subject emerges when identity fails. Here, psychoanalytic theory acts as a corrective to the combative.
Hang on. Metafarcical says, don't they sometimes take trans to mean transcend? Well, it's transform or transcend. It could be either way. But in this case, it was transform, but transcend means exactly the same thing. But yes, that is correct.
Identity politics and the use of gender theory to uphold identitary claims. Psychoanalysis contends that the impossibility of representation of sexuality in the unconscious implicitly challenges the fixity of identity.
Wow.
In this regard, in our collection, Yannick Thiem's contribution proposes a shift in our construction of gender. Thiem invites us to move away from thinking as gender as a self-reflexive or socially mediated self-identification, and to begin to see
Thanks,
gender
Chris.
and race as ongoing elaborations of embodied addresses and responses. It is in this sense that gender transition raises the issue of raced embodiment and necessarily interpolates the neglected intersection of gender and race by considering the unspoken status of normative whiteness.
Oh!
While identity proposes to be the expression of one's authentic self and pledges to bequeath meaning, in actuality, psychoanalysis shows that it is a construction originarily, and this is Freud and Lacan, of an identification with an other. Therefore, identity is foundationally and structurally an alienation. So with this in mind, we may ask, are identitary claims representative of or useful to the minorities they seek to advocate for? While the term gender enabled activists to advocate for gender variant individuals, David Valentine shows that this advocacy carries implicit assumptions about gender and sexuality, thus often unwittingly reinforcing racial and class hierarchies that ironically negatively impact the most vulnerable transgender identified people, young, poor people of color. Socially constructed categories of power oppression, such as gender, race, and class, are mutually constitutive.
Wait.
They're not isolated or distinct.
Wait. Socially constructed categories of power and oppression, such as
Just gender, race, and class.
gender, race, and class. They believe gender is socially constructed. They believe race is socially constructed. They believe class is socially constructed. And they're all socially constructed by capitalism. That means they believe these are made up categories that capitalism created in order to enforce power dynamics on us. Yeah, that's the screenshot right there.
Are mutually constitutive. They're not isolated or distinct and should be addressed as interrelated. For example, a Black trans woman may be a victim of violence as the result of the aggression of racism, sexism, transphobia. These systems of oppression combine in an overarching structure of domination. The academic conception of a sharply defined contrast between gender and sexuality does not necessarily describe how people of various backgrounds think of themselves. This semantic discordance is often expressed in the very issues that bring clients to their, or analysans to their, to the analyst's office.
Both sexual orientation and gender identity are approximations for something that cannot be symbolized or imagined. Any attempt to represent sexuality directly encounters an impossibility posed by what psychoanalysis calls sexual difference. This concerns a failure of representation at the center of language. Language failure, however, is its possibility. Language stems both from the impossibility of arriving at a full meaning, as well as the very excess it produces and cannot account for. Sexuality is what we're never done talking about. Language imposes a failed imperative to represent sexuality, yet words will always fail to represent it. The intractability of sexual difference has permeated clinical practice at times, even to the surprise of some psychoanalysts who, in the service of adaptation, focus their attention on emotional maturity, ego strength, while discounting erotic life. Long absent, soon forgotten, sex and gender had become misconstrued in many contemporary psychoanalytic practice and theories, and had been considered a natural, desirable, linear destiny. Sex is the privileged side where optimistic attachment and the hopeful promise of reparativity become undone. In our experience, even those analysants who bound their sexual enjoyment, whether in normative or transgressive practice, nevertheless affirm that something is amiss. Even when pleasure occurs, where we expect to find the other, we find an absence.
The early debates in psychoanalysis paved the way for a challenge. All right. To essentialist notions of femininity. Wait, my cursor has its own mind. It's my.
What did she say? She said the early debates of psychoanalysis.
Okay. Paved the way for a challenge. All right.
If only these people could just speak
Essentialist notions of
extemporaneously.
femininity. Wait, my cursor has its own mind. My cursor has its own drive. 1 second.
It's not a problem when you don't have to read a speech.
Exactly. 1 moment, sorry. The intractability of sexual difference has permeated. 1 moment.
If you want,
Come on, socialists. Come on, get it together.
Working from
I see.
similar.
I got it. Both sexual orientation and gender identity. Yes, is that what
No,
we are?
the early debates. I will follow that. We wanted to return to is the idea that early debates in psychoanalysis paved the way for a challenge to essentialist notions of femininity that were crucial for the development of feminist theory, and further challenging from feminism the centrality of the Oedipus complex and its heterosexist developmental telos. Feminism has contributed the notion that being a woman and being a mother were distinct, separating these concepts that were often linked in popular understanding that will remain controversial as women increasingly took on roles outside the parameters of motherhood. And here is an important difference within the development of feminism. And again, we are rushing through a complex historical moment just to bring a context of how we organize our collection. That we have on the one hand, the Anglo-American psychoanalytic feminist tradition, that emphasize the pre-Oedipal sociality and intersubjectivity, focusing on the values of integration, harmony, and more pragmatically on the psychic effects of power dynamics in the political environment. Continental feminism highlighted self-division and the internalized other, also seeking to disentangle femininity from maternity. The French feminist writers were closer to psychoanalysis than the foremother of feminism, Simone de Beauvoir, who, like Freud, questioned femininity as a given destiny, famously arguing that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, which is something that early on Freud posed as a question. How does a girl become a woman? Or why do girls love their fathers and not their mothers, we may say.
Oh, okay. How does a girl become a woman turned into how does anyone become a woman? I got it. Okay.
Would you like to continue,
yes.
Manya?
Yes,
Great.
yeah. In recent years, the relationship between feminism and psychoanalysis has generated new interest, reinvigorated by British object relations, as well as its American iteration, relational psychoanalysis. The revival of psychoanalysis is also visible in the burgeoning field of Lacanian and Kristavan-inspired criticism.
What the fuck is that?
By way of reappraisal of the mother-child bond, as well the mother-daughter relation and identification, the politics of the psyche, abjection, fantasy, desire, embodiment, were taken now into account. Tackling the ideological underpinning of representation, including cinema and literature, the intersections between race, gender, and power, and symptoms of these imbrications, such as pornography, racism, violence, and oppression, were critically interrogated. Feminism not only broke the ideological tie to biological essentialism, freeing women socially and politically, but also broke a natural relation to the, or natural or naturalizing relation to the female body as a determinative of a fixed gendered meaning. Freud paved the way for this fracture between nature and culture when he permanently altered the Cartesian dichotomy between spirit and flesh as the mystery of the speaking body took center stage.
In terms of this tension between gender as identity and sexuality as concerns the unconscious and the drives, Jennifer Finney Boylan astutely stated that sexual orientation is who you go to bed with, but gender identity is who you go to bed as. Boylan's remarks open up to a more radical understanding of sex and gender. Psychoanalysis reveals the paradoxical reality of sexuality, namely that while one may be thinking that one is going to bed as someone, in fact, due to the partial organization of the drives, when we go to bed with someone, we go to bed as something, an object. The problem is that we're not sure what this something is, either for ourselves or for our sexual partner. In talking about gender and sexuality, psychoanalysis is not concerned with who.
Wait, breaking news. We have a new Trump post on Truth Social. Oh no! Are you guys ready? Elon Musk, or mediocre Musk, is constantly high on ketamine, always making promises he can't keep, not to be trusted. He wants to go to Mars. How about you go back to Africa? Is this real? Hang on. I need to get onto True Social. I need to see if this is fucking real. If this is actually fucking real. No. No, I don't think it's real. I think it might be fake. I think I might have been tricked. I might have been tricked. Oh man. I was tricked. I was conned. It's not real, but it's fucking funny. It's not real. It's fake. It's fake. I was tricked. But it is fucking hilarious. It is hilarious. Okay, back to the thing.
In any case, as Freud observed, there is more than one who engage as part object in any sexual interaction. As the first chapter in our contribution in our volume, authored by Tim Dean, is the opening chapter titled Freud's Menage a Quatre. Dean thinks through the difficulty of sex and specifically the challenge of dispelling certain assumptions about it, such as its dyadic relationality, this ineluctable heterosexuality, its vulnerability to pathologization, as well as its status either as symptom or even as a cure. The term sex itself is ambiguous, referring to both sexual difference and sexual behavior. Most psychoanalytic research over the past few decades has focused on the former, often under the rubric of gender, to the neglect of the latter. Likewise, the academic field of queer theory has drifted away from thinking about sex in favor of other objects of inquiry. What may be symptomatic in the end is our assumption that we can say what sex is. And
Yes.
Dean would argue in his contribution that what is most proper to psychoanalysis is not heterosexuality, but a sexuality that undoes stable binary categories. And he refers to Freud's famous quip that there are at least 4 people present in any coupling of 2, showing that how psychoanalytic insights make simple arithmetic not so simple at all. What may be symptomatic in the end.
Psychoanalysis means that math isn't really math because in every coupling of 2 people, there are at least 4 people involved. I fucking hate Freud. This is so painful. I need to learn this. I fucking need to learn this, but this is so... Where's my weed? Hang on. I'm sorry. Hang on. Not that one. This one.
Are our own assumptions that we can say with certitude what sex is. Our confident descriptions and prescriptions are perhaps symptomatic of the relentless pressure induced by the enigmas at the heart of sex.
From the Kama Sutra to today's sex self-help books, right? The assumption is that if we could only get sex right, it wouldn't be a problem. It's well known that psychoanalysis was born from Freud's listening to the suffering of women whose bodily ailments defied anatomical explanations. Their symptoms resisted traditional medicine and challenged scientific thinking. Behind their pain, Freud found repressed and often...
Can we do just like a Freud 101? Can I just quickly find like a Freud 101? I need a Freud 101 video. I need us to do introduction, Freud for dummies. I feel like I would learn this better if I see, listen, look, the weed has already inspired me. The weed is saying, Karlyn, you tried to jump into the deep end of the swimming pool and you didn't drown or anything, but it wasn't the best experience. And maybe we just need to go into the beginners area in the swimming pool first, and we need to learn how to float. And that way the jump into the deep end of the pool will be much better later. Hang on. Freud 101. I need like Freud for dummies, Freud for beginners, Freud in 10 minutes. Foundation Freud. Oh, from Yale. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Okay, we're not going to do a cartoon. We're going to do the smart people thing. Okay, we're going to do this. Is everyone ready to go and take a course at Yale? This is perfect. We're going to Connecticut today. We're going to Yale. Congratulations, everyone. This course, actually, this will be really interesting because this is an old-ass course. Introduction to Psychology. This lecture introduces students to the theories of Sigmund Freud, including a brief apparently that's not real anymore, biographical description and his contributions to the field. Excellent. Perfect. This is great. This is great. We're all going to an Ivy League school today. All right. Starting now.
Last class we talked about the brain. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some foundations. So today and Monday, we're going to talk about two very big ideas. And these ideas are associated with Sigmund Freud and B.F. Skinner and our psychoanalysis and behaviorism. And I want to talk about psychoanalysis today and behaviorism next week. Now, one of these things...
Yeah, actually, this is true. The last time we took a class at Yale, because this is not our first class at Yale, the last time we took a class at Yale, we learned that drag queen story hour is just gender performativity. They literally said that. This old-ass guy with a beard said that the whole point of drag queens was gender performativity, was the performance of gender. And that's how I connected Judith Butler to the drag queen story hour. So we have learned very valuable things at Yale before. You know, you might feel like we're slumming. Well, we are in New Haven right now. New Haven, if you've never been to New Haven, pretty much sucks. Don't go to New Haven. But, you know, it's a nice enough classroom. It's got a lot of wood. That looks nice.
Things that makes these theories so interesting is their scope. Most of the work we're going to talk about in this class, most of the ideas are narrow. So we're going to talk about somebody's idea about racial prejudice. But that's not a theory of language acquisition. We'll talk about theories of schizophrenia, but they're not explanations of sexual attractiveness. Most theories are specialized theories. But these two views are grand theories. They're theories of everything, encompassing just about everything that matters. Day-to-day life, child development, mental illness, religion, war, love. Freud and Skinner had explanations of all of these. Now, this is not a history course. I have zero interest in describing historical figures in psychology just for the sake of telling you about the history of the field. What I want to tell you about, though, is I want to talk about these ideas because so much rests on them. And even more importantly, a lot of these ideas have critical influence on how we think about the present. And that's there. Now, for better or worse, we live in a world profoundly affected by Sigmund Freud. If I had to ask you, name a famous psychologist, the answer, most of you, would be Freud. He's the most famous psychologist ever, and he's had a profound influence on the 20th and 21st century.
So many ways.
Some biographical information. He was born in the 1850s. He spent most of his life in Vienna, Austria, but he died in London, and he escaped to London soon after retreating there at the beginning.
I'm gonna be doing deep research tonight on ChatGPT and other assorted AIs about. I would like AI to. This is why AI is so fucking great. I can go into AI right now and I can say, I would like you to, and we're going to watch this and we're going to actually learn this stuff, but AI can be a useful tool. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in and say, I would like to learn about how Freud's theories evolved from the time they were introduced to the public up through when they influenced queer theory and queer Marxism. And can you break down the evolution of the ideas and explain how it started with Freud and then it ended up at gender fucking insanity? And I'm going to ask it specifically about all of the queer related stuff. And it's going to write me a whole report. And then we get to learn from that stuff quickly. And it might not be the most complete thing. We'll have to research into different aspects of it. But isn't that fucking awesome that we can do that with AI? It's so much faster. It's so much better than having to piece all this stuff together. Now, the thing of it is, though, with AI, you have to know what questions to ask and you have to know how to ask them. So not like any Yahoo off the internet is going to be able to go, I know that Freud was directly influential for all the queer bullshit that's going on in the world today. Most people aren't even going to think to ask that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you have to learn a certain amount about this stuff to know what very specific questions to craft for the AI, and then you need to learn how to read the answers so that you understand where to go in for more information, when you need to ask it to do greater research, what subjects. Like, did the AI actually get it right? Because the AI doesn't always get it right, so you always have to double check that. But it's just like, it's so useful for stuff like that. Anyway.
World War II, as the Nazis began to occupy where he lived. He's one of the most famous scholars ever, but he's not known for any single discovery. Instead, he's known for the development of an encompassing theory of mind, one that he developed over the span of many decades. He was, in his time, extremely well known, a celebrity, recognized on the street.
No, we will not be speeding up the lecture. Do you want to know why? We don't do that. Do you want to know why? When you speed up the lecture, you're not actually listening to what's being said. And the purpose of this is not to do things in the quickest way possible. The purpose of this is to listen actively and deeply and learn what these people are saying the first time so that we don't have to go back and do it again. Because Metafarcical, here's what I've learned about you since you've been on the channel, and I hope you stay on the channel, and I hope you keep learning, and we want you to be part of the community and all that stuff. But what I have learned about you is you don't listen. And that's common. So I don't want you to feel bad. Most people don't actually listen. They don't. They don't listen to what's being said to them. They don't listen to what even like they're listening to podcasts and stuff like that. They don't listen to people when they're having conversations with them on Twitter. They don't actually respond to what the people are saying. They don't listen to videos they're watching. They don't listen to anything. They may be listening to it in passing, but they're not actually comprehending it. And so I don't care if he has a lot of preamble. I don't care. You don't know what he's going to say. You have to say, do you know how many there was this one communist presentation one time. Does everyone remember this? We got through the entire presentation without much of anything being said. And then I'm talking at the very end of the presentation when I almost wanted to turn the presentation off because we had watched this entire fuck off presentation and almost nothing was said until the very last minute in the presentation. And then the communists started talking about violently overthrowing the federal government. And it was one of the best clips ever. And it was like, if we had not listened to every single portion, I didn't expect him to talk about randomly, off the cuff, oh yeah, we want to violently overthrow the federal government. I mean, it wasn't like that blunt, but it almost was. And so there's a purpose to this. This is about learning. Do you want to know why we don't often have to go back and watch the same thing over and over again? Or at least I don't. I don't know about you guys. But because I actually sit here and listen. I may look like I'm knitting, I may look like I'm checking Twitter, but I'm always listening to what they're saying because I've trained myself to do this. How I train myself to do this and how many people in the community have trained themselves to sit their asses down and open their ears and listen is that we have practiced this. If you need to leave the stream early, fine. But I'm not speeding up this video unless there's a reason for it. Sometimes I have to. Sometimes I have a time constraint. But unless there's a damn good reason, We listen at the normal speed. And look at this. Now we've taken much longer because I had to break all that down and explain it. But I actually think it's a good thing for you to understand because that's something that you need to practice. I can tell by your responses. And there's no harm in that. And I think other people need to hear this too. So I want you to know, I'm not just saying this to you. I think there are other people in the chat that need to hear this and need to understand this. Most people don't know how to do it. It's a skill you have to learn. And so that's part of what we're doing here. We're sitting down and listening when so few people actually do that anymore.
And throughout his life, he was a man of extraordinary energy and productivity, in part because he was a very serious cocaine addict, but also just in general, he was just a high-energy sort of person. He was up for the Nobel Prize in medicine and in literature, didn't get either one of them, didn't get the prize in medicine because Albert Einstein, everybody loves Albert Einstein. Well, Albert Einstein really wrote a letter, because they asked for opinions of other Nobel Prize, wrote a letter saying, don't give the prize to Freud. He doesn't deserve a Nobel Prize. He's just a psychologist. Oh, yeah. Okay. While he's almost universally acclaimed as a profoundly important intellectual figure, he's also the object of considerable dislike. This is in part because of his character. He was not a very nice man in many ways. He was deeply ambitious to the cause of promoting psychoanalysis, to the cause of presenting his view and defending it. And he was often dishonest, extremely brutal to his friends, and terrible to his enemies. He was an interesting character. My favorite Freud story was as he was leaving Europe during the rise of the Nazis, as he was ready to go to England from, I think, either Germany or Austria, he had to sign a letter from the Gestapo. Gestapo agents intercepted him and demanded he sign a letter saying that at no point had he been threatened or harassed by the Gestapo. So he signs the letter, and then he writes underneath it, the Gestapo has not harmed me in any way. In fact, I highly recommend the Gestapo to everybody. He had a certain aggression to him. He's also disliked, often hated, because of his views. He was seen as a sexual renegade, out to destroy the conception of people as good and rational and pure beings. And when the Nazis rose to power in the 1930s, he was identified as a Jew who was devoted to destroying the most sacred notions of Christianity.
We love Jews.
To some extent,
everyone loves Jews.
Many people see him this way, and to some extent, this accusation has some truth to it.
I kind of forgot that Freud was Jewish. Wait, what did he just say? The accusation has some truth to it? Hang on. Freud was a Jew that wanted to destroy Christianity? Hang on. I mean, I knew Freud was Jewish. I just hadn't thought about it, I guess. Obviously, we love Jews here. The Holocaust was the worst thing that ever happened. 10 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Hitler is burning in hell. All that stuff. Okay, fine.
Out to destroy the conception of people
he was a Holocaust
as
survivor,
good and
true.
rational and pure beings. And when the Nazis rose to power in the 1930s, he was identified as a Jew who was devoted to destroying the most sacred notions of Christianity. And to some extent, many people see him this way. And to some extent, this accusation has some truth to it. Freud made claims about people that many of us, maybe most of us, would rather not know. Well, okay, what did he say? Well, if you ask somebody who doesn't like Freud what he said, they'll describe some of the stupider things he said. And in fact, Freud said a lot of things, some of which were not very rational. For instance, he's well known for his account of phallic symbols, arguing certain architectural monuments are subconsciously developed as penile representations.
I'm sorry, that's absolutely true. That's not silly at all. I absolutely believe there are monuments that were developed to be a giant penis. We can all look at the Washington Monument and know exactly what that was supposed to represent. All right. There is a building in the middle of downtown San Francisco. It's one of the ugliest fucking buildings. I think it's the Salesforce building, isn't it? It looks like a giant dick. All right. It looks like a fucking dick. So don't tell me that there are not monuments erected to be penises when they actually look like a penis. Of course men are going to build a big tribute to themselves in some way. It was an architect with a freaking complex. Or a really small dick and he was trying to compensate for something, you know? He did say sometimes a cigar is just a good old smoke. Well, why didn't you ask Bill Clinton about that, everyday therapist? Did Bill Clinton think a cigar was just a good old smoke, or did he think that was a substitute for a dick? Yeah, Jeff Bezos' spacecraft. You're going to tell me that Jeff Bezos' spacecraft wasn't crafted to look like a dick? Come on.
And related to this, he developed the notorious theory of penis envy. And penis envy is an account of a developmental state that every one of you who is female has gone through, according to Freud. And the idea is that
I have,
you
actually.
discovered
I'm very jealous
at some
of people
point
who
in
have
your development
penises.
that you lacked a penis.
I'm actually deeply jealous.
This is a catastrophe.
No, that's not silly either. I have wanted to be a man basically all my life. I'm not trans or anything, and I never would be. I'm a woman. It's just the way it goes. But like, yes, I have been very jealous of men's penises. You want to know why? They can pee standing up and I can't. Every woman at some point is jealous of men's penises because they can pee standing up and they never have the line to the bathroom. And it sucks, and it's not fair. And men purposefully build women's bathrooms smaller. I'm convinced of this too. Have you guys ever been to an airport women's bathroom, like an old one, where they like purposefully built it with like 3 fucking stalls? That was the decision of a man right there, because they forgot women can't pee standing up, and it sucks. Anyway, I swear to God, this is what happened. I smoked weed right before this. That was the mistake. But it is already less painful, and that was the point. So I guess it was also not a mistake at the same time. You guys are just going to have to listen to me talk now, okay?
And so each of you
it's not my fault.
At that point that you had been castrated. You had once had a penis, but somebody had taken it from you.
So true.
You then turn to your father and love your father.
No, not true.
Because your father has a penis, so he's a sort of penis substitute.
No.
You reject your mother, who's equally unworthy due to her penis lack, and that shapes your psychosexual development. Now, if that's the sort of thing you know about Freud, you are not going to have a very high opinion of him or of his work. But at the core of Freud's explanation, the more interesting ideas is a set of claims of immense intellectual importance. And the 2 main ones are this. The 2 main ones involve the existence of an unconscious motivation, and the notion of unconscious dynamics or unconscious conflict, which lead to mental illnesses, dreams, slips of the tongue, and so on.
Slips of the tongue, Freudian
The first
slip.
idea, the idea of unconscious motivation, involves rejecting the claim that you know what you're doing. So suppose you fall in love with somebody, and you decide you want to marry them. And then somebody was asked to ask you why. And you'd say something like, well, I'm ready to get married at this stage of my life. I really love the person is smart and attractive, I want to have kids, whatever. And maybe this is true. But a Freudian might say that even if this is your honest answer, you're not lying to anybody else, still, there are desires and motivations that govern your behavior that you may not be aware of. So, in fact, you might want to marry John because he reminds you of your father, or because you want to get back at somebody for betraying you. If somebody was to tell you this, you'd say, that's total nonsense. But that wouldn't deter a Freudian. A Freudian would say that these processes are unconscious. So, of course, you just don't know what's happening. So the radical idea here is you might not know why you do what you do. And this is something we accept for things like visual perception. We accept that you look around the world and you get sensations and you figure out there's a car, there's a tree, there's a person, and you're just unconscious of how this happens. But it's unpleasant and kind of frightening that this could happen, that this could apply to things like why you're now studying at Yale, why you feel the way you do towards your friends, towards your family. Now, the marriage case is extreme.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Scott says, I'd never see these people without me. Yeah, thank you. That's the whole point. We're learning something new. We're taking a class at Yale.
But Freud gives a lot of simpler examples where this sort of unconscious motivation might play a role. So, have you ever liked somebody or disliked them and not know why?
Yes.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're doing something or you're arguing for something or making a decision for reasons that you can't fully articulate?
Yes.
Have you ever forgotten somebody's name at exactly the wrong time?
Yep.
Have you ever called out the wrong name in the throes of passion?
Nope.
This is all the Freudian unconscious.
Not
the
it.
idea is that we do these things. These things are explained in terms of cognitive systems that we're not aware of. Now, all of this would be fine if your unconscious was a reasonable, rational computer, if your unconscious was really smart and looking out for your best interests. But according to Freud, that's not the way it works. According to Freud, there are 3 distinct processes going on in your head. And these are...
So Joe says, I distrust psychology, but I think psychiatry more. The thing about psychology is like, psychology is an art. It's not a science. And there can be as many studies as people want, but it is an art. Like, you have to understand how to flow with many different people to be able to detach yourself from your personal point of view, to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to see the world through their eyes. At least this is how I think about it. Everyday therapists may have a different explanation than me, but how I think about it is, when I was working with like groups and organizations, I would, and it's kind of what I do with the left too. There is a conception of Karlyn, and I take the conception of Karlyn and I put it over here, because it's not my job to be Karlyn right now. It's my job to see the world through the eyes of this Yale professor, to understand why he sees things, to understand his motivations behind it, why he's explaining things like he does. Why is he picking this word choice? Why is he moving around the room in a certain way? Why is he doing it this way? Because then you can start to understand how he's thinking and break that down. And then you can predict, what he's going to do and stuff like that. So it's an art form. Psychiatry, I don't trust psychiatry at all. I don't believe in drugging people. I think psychiatric drugs, now, not to say without exception. Of course, there are going to be exceptions to things, and I don't want anyone to make anyone feel bad if you've been on psychiatric medication. But I think the world would be a fundamentally better place without psychiatric medication at all, and people are going to have to find other ways to cope. And there are plenty of other ways to cope that are not long-term psychiatric medication, which I think takes away your humanity and your soul. So there are good psychologists and there are bad psychologists. I'm sure the same is true with psychiatry, but I don't know, man. I don't trust psychiatry.
Violent internal conflict. And the way you act and the way you think are products not of a singular rational being, but of a set of conflicting creatures. And these 3 parts are the id, the ego, and the superego. And they emerge developmentally. The id, according to Freud, is present at birth. It's the animal part of the self. It wants to eat, drink, pee, poop, get warm, and have sexual satisfaction. It is outrageously stupid. It works on what Freud called the pleasure principle. It wants pleasure, and it wants it now. And that's, according to Freud, how a human begins. Pure id. Freud had this wonderful phrase, polymorphous perversity. This pure desire for pleasure. Now, unfortunately, life doesn't work like that. What you want isn't always what you get. And this leads to a set of reactions to cope with the fact that pleasure isn't always there when you want it. Either by planning how to satisfy your desires, or planning how to suppress them. And this system is known as the ego, or the self. And it works on the reality principle. And it works on the principle of trying to figure out how to make your way through the world, how to satisfy your pleasures, or in some cases, how to give up on them. And the ego, the emergence...
If a local university was hiring a psychology professor, would I teach? No, I don't think so. Listen, I used to adjunct for universities and I fucking hated it. Adjuncting at universities sucks because students don't actually want. Here's what I learned when I used to teach university classes, and I taught undergraduate and graduate classes. Here's what I learned. Students don't give a fuck about learning. Students are going to get pissed off every time you give them a criticism. If you mark them down on a paper, even if you're right, they're going to get pissed off and they're going to write a shitty review about you online. And then someone in the academic unit is going to come speak to you and be like, "Are you torturing these students?" And I'm like, "No, I pointed out that this person had a lot of typos in their essay that they sent me, and I didn't give them an A, and they were pissed off about it." And then you have to deal with that over and over and over and over and over again. That you have to beg the students to do anything. They always do it's like, and I'm sure it's even gotten. I taught a long ass time ago, and so I'm sure it's gotten much worse now, but I don't think I could ever go and teach at a university again. I think I would rather shoot myself in the foot, honestly. Oh my God, great statement on psychiatric drugs. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. I mean, I don't know, I've kind of thought about that, but I don't see that happening.
Of the ego for Freud symbolizes the origin of consciousness. Finally, if this was all there was, it might be a simpler world. But Freud had a third component, that of the superego. And the superego is the internalized rules of parents and society. So what happens in the course of development is you're just trying to make your way through the world and satisfy your desires, but sometimes you're punished for them. Some desires are inappropriate, some actions are wrong, and you're punished for it. The idea is that you come out, you get in your head a superego, a conscience. In these movies, it'd be like the little angel above your head that tells you when things are wrong. And basically, yourself, the ego, is in between the id and the superego. One thing to realize, I told you the id is outrageously stupid. It just says, oh, hungry, food, sex, oh, let's get warm, oh. The superego is also stupid. The superego, according to Freud, is not some brilliant moral philosopher telling you about right and wrong. The superego is like, you should be ashamed of yourself. That's disgusting. Stop doing that. Oh,
true.
And in between these two screaming creatures, one of them telling you to seek out your desires, the other one telling you should be ashamed of yourself, is the ego. Now, according to Freud, most of this is unconscious. So we see, bubbling up to the top, we feel, we experience ourselves. And the driving of the id, the forces of the id and the forces of the superego are unconscious, in that we cannot access them. We don't know what, it's like the workings of our kidneys or our stomachs. You can't introspect and find them. Rather, they do their work without conscious knowledge. Now, Freud developed this. This is the Freudian theory in broad outline. He extended it and developed it into a theory of psychosexual development. And so Freud's theory is, as I said before, a theory of everyday life, of decisions, of errors, of falling in love, but it's also a theory of child development. So Freud believed there were 5 stages of personality development, and each is associated with a particular erogenous zone. And Freud believed as well that if you have a problem at a certain stage, if something goes wrong, you'll be stuck there. So according to Freud, there are people in this room who are what they are because they got stuck in the oral stage or the anal stage. And that's not good. So the oral stage is when you start off. The mouth is associated with pleasure. Everything is sucking and chewing and so on. And the problem for Freud is premature weaning of a child, depriving him of the breast, could lead to serious problems in his personality development. It could make him, as the phrase goes, into an oral person. And this orality could be described literally.
Have I explored Kinsey? I mean, I know of Kinsey. Actually, the movie Kinsey is really good. Like they made, and I don't know how exactly accurate that movie is, but I really actually enjoyed that movie. But no, I've looked into his work a little bit, not extensively though.
Freud used this as an explanation for why somebody might eat too much, or chew gum, or smoke. They're trying to achieve satisfaction through their mouth of a sort they didn't get in this very early stage of development. But it can also be more abstract. If your roommate is dependent and needy, you could then go to your roommate and say, "You're an oral person. The first year of your life did not go well." A phrase even more popular is the anal stage, and that happens after the oral stage, and problems can emerge if toilet training is not handled correctly. If you have problems during those years of life, you could become an anal personality. According to Freud, and your roommate could say, "Your problem is you're too anal." And
Said that many
according
times.
to Freud, literally, it meant you were unwilling to part with your own feces.
So true.
It's written down here, I know, it's true.
So true.
And the way it manifests
Actually.
itself, as you know from just how people talk, is you're compulsive, you're clean, you're stingy. This is the anal personality. Then it gets a little bit more complicated. The next stage is the phallic stage. Actually, this isn't that much more complicated. The focus of pleasure shifts to the genitals, and fixation can lead to excessive masculinity in females, or if in males, or if you're female, need for attention or domination. Now, at this point, something really interesting happens, called the Oedipus complex. And this is based on a story, the mythical story of a king who killed his father and married his mother. And according to Freud, this happens to all of us in this way. Well, all of us, by all of us, Freud meant men. So here's the idea. You're 3 or 4 years old. You're in the phallic stage. So what are you interested in? Well, you're interested in your penis. And then you seek an external object. Freud's sort of vague about this, but you seek some sort of satisfaction. But who's out there who'd be sweet and kind and loving and wonderful? Well, Mom. So the child infers, Mom is nice. I love Mom. So far, and so far this is not crazy. Little boy falling in love with his mother.
It is a little crazy, yeah, actually.
Problem. Dad's in the way. Now, this is going to get progressively weirder, but I will have to say, as the father of two sons, both sons went to a phase where they explicitly said they wanted to marry Mummy and me. If something bad happened to me, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So there's this, but now it gets a little bit aggressive. So the idea is the child determines that he's going to kill his father. Every 3 and 4-year-old boy thinks this. But then, because children, according to Freud, don't have a good sense of the boundary between their mind and the world, which is a problem. The problem is they think their father can tell that they're plotting to kill him. And they figure their father is now angry at them. And then they ask themselves, what's the worst thing Dad could do to me? And the answer is castration. So they come to the conclusion that their father is going to castrate them because of their illicit love for their mom. And then they say, Dad wins. And then they don't think about sex for several years. And that's the latency stage. The latency stage is they've gone through this huge thing with Mom and Dad. Fell in love with Mom, wanted to kill my father. Dad was going to castrate me. Fell out of love with Mom, out of the sex business. And its sex is repressed until you get to the genital stage. And the genital stage is the stage we are all in, the healthy adult stage. Now that you're adults and you've gone through all the developmental stages, where do you stand? You're not out of the woods yet. Because unconscious mechanisms are still, even if you haven't got fixated or anything, there's still this dynamic going on all the time with your id, your ego, and your superego. And the idea is your superego, remember your superego is stupid. So your superego isn't only telling you not to do bad things, it's telling you not to think bad things. So what's happening is your id is sending up all of this weird, sick stuff, all of these crazy sexual and violent desires. Oh, I'll kill him. I'll have sex with that. I'll have extra helpings on my dessert. And your super ego say, no, no, no. And this stuff is repressed. It doesn't even make it to consciousness. The problem is Freud had a very sort of hydraulic theory of what goes on. And some of this stuff slips out. And it shows up in dreams, and it shows up in slips of the tongue, and in exceptional cases it shows up in certain clinical symptoms. So what happens is, Freud described a lot of normal life as in terms of different ways we use to keep that horrible stuff from the id making its way to consciousness. And he called these defense mechanisms. You're defending yourself against the horrible parts of yourself. And some of these make a little bit of sense. I mean, one way to describe this in a non-technical, non-Freudian way is there's certain things about ourselves we'd rather not know. There's certain desires we'd rather not know, and we have ways to hide them. So for instance, there's sublimation. Sublimation is you might have a lot of energy.
Yo, look at this.
Maybe sexual energy. Or
What did Joe find? Freud, the first queer therapist. Scholme, yeah. Well, that name sounds Jewish, doesn't it? Can someone look this up? Freud, can someone look this up and provide a link? Thanks, Joe.
aggressive energy. But instead of turning it to a sexual or aggressive target, what you do is you focus it in some other way. So you can imagine a great artist like Picasso turning the sexual energy into his artwork. There's
That's a real thing, for sure.
There's displacement. Displacement is you have certain shameful thoughts or desires, and you refocus them more appropriately. A boy who's bullied by his father may hate his father and want to hurt him. But since this is very shameful and difficult, the boy might instead kick the dog and think he hates the dog, because that's a more acceptable target.
That's absolutely true. That definitely happens. So Freud isn't entirely full of shit.
Projection is,
I want to say this. Freud is not entirely full of shit. Freud on some things is very correct. And then in some things, Freud is fuck off insane. So it's like anything else. It's like you take the good with the bad, or you keep the good and throw out the bad, or something like that.
Certain impulses I'm uncomfortable with. So rather than own them myself, I project them to somebody else. A classic example for Freud is homosexual desires. The idea is that I feel this tremendous lust towards you, for instance, and any of you, all of you, you three. And I'm ashamed of this lust. So what I say is, hey, are you guys looking at me in a sexual manner? Are you lusting after me? How disgusting. Because what I do is I take my own desires and I project it to others. And Freud suggested
I have experienced that exact thing with at least 3 men on the internet. That exact thing. Holy shit. I never thought of it that way.
certain impulses I'm uncomfortable with. So rather than own them myself, I project them to somebody else. A classic example for Freud is homosexual desires. The idea is that I feel this tremendous lust towards you.
Obviously, the people I experienced this with were not homosexual, but I think that the same thing applies. Hang on. Anytime you hear, oh, Karlyn tried to sleep with me. Oh, but did I? But did I? And why would you be saying that all over the internet, James? Why would you be saying that? Because I was there and I know what the fuck happened. And it wasn't that. Thanks, Reagan. That's exactly what I was looking for.
For instance, and any of you, all of you, you three. And I'm ashamed of this lust. So what I say is, hey, are you guys looking at me in a sexual manner? Are you lusting after me? How disgusting.
Yeah.
Because what I do is I take my own desires and I project it to others.
Yep.
And Freud suggested, perhaps not implausibly, that men who believe other men, who are obsessed with the sexuality of other men, are themselves projecting away their own sexual desires.
That's also true.
There's rationalization, which is that when you do something or think something bad, you rationalize it and you give it a more socially acceptable explanation. A parent who enjoys smacking his child will typically not say, I enjoy smacking my child, rather will say, it's for the child's own good. I'm being a good parent by doing this. And finally, there is regression, which is returning to an earlier stage of development. And you actually see this in children. In times of stress and trauma, they'll become younger. They will act younger. They might cry, they might suck their thumb, seek out a blanket, or so on. Now, these are all mechanisms that for Freud are not the slightest bit pathological. They're part of normal life. Normally, we do these things to keep an equilibrium among the different systems of the unconscious. But sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes things go awry. And what happens is, a phrase that's not currently used in psychology, but was popular during Freud's time, hysteria. Hysteria includes phenomena like hysterical blindness and hysterical deafness, which is when you cannot see and cannot hear, even though there's nothing physiologically wrong with you. Paralysis, trembling, panic attacks, gaps of memory, including amnesia, and so on. And the idea is that these are...
I didn't realize that Freud, like all these ideas were related to Freud. I guess I didn't put, it makes complete sense, and I think I knew this, but I didn't put two and two together, and I'm like, yeah, okay, so Freud was really onto something with some stuff, so maybe I judged prematurely.
These are actually symptoms. These are symptoms of mechanisms going on to keep things unconscious. It's a common enough idea in movies. Often in movies what happens is somebody goes to an analyst, they have some horrible problem. They can't remember something, or they have some sort of blackouts and so on. And the analyst tells them something, and at one point they get this insight, and they realize why they've blinded themselves, why they can't remember. And for Freud, this is what happens. Freud originally attempted to get these memories out through hypnosis, but then moved to the mechanism of free association. And according to Freud, the idea is patients offer resistance to this, and then the idea of a psychoanalyst is to get over the resistance and help patients get insight. The key notion of psychoanalysis.
Look at Joe sending in all this good stuff. Joe, do you want me to give you a moderator wrench so you can just post the links directly if you're looking this stuff up? Because I will. Hang on, Joe's a moderator. Congratulations. Welcome. Now you can post links directly. Can you post us the link to this so we don't have to go look it up separately?
Your problems are actually reflect deeper phenomena. You're hiding something from yourself. And once you know what's going on for deeper phenomena, your problems will go away. I'm going to give you an example of a therapy session. Now, this is not a Freudian analysis. We'll discuss later on in the course what a Freudian analysis is, but this is not a pure Freudian analysis. A Freudian analysis, a person is lying on a couch, does not see their therapist is very non-directive. But I'm going to present this as an example here because it illustrates so many of the Freudian themes, particularly themes about dreams, the importance of dreams, about repression, and about hidden meaning. So this is from a television episode, and the characters, some of you may have seen this, many of you will not have. The character is suffering from panic attacks. In particular, he has panic attacks when he sees, his first panic attack originated when he walked to a swimming pool and he saw a family of ducks fly away. And he had a panic attack. High heart pounding, sweating, flushed, and then he passed out. And these panic attacks grew worse and worse until he saw a therapist who ended up prescribing him medication. And this is discussed as one of the meetings he had with the therapist. Freud's contributions extend beyond the study of individual psychology and individual pathology. Freud had a lot to say about dreams, as you could see in this illustration. He believed that dreams had a manifest content, meaning what you experience in your dream. But dreams always had a latent content as well, meaning the hidden implication of the dream. He viewed all dreams as wish fulfillment. Every dream you have is a certain wish you have, even though it might be a forbidden wish that you wouldn't wish to have, you wouldn't want to have. And dreams had, and this is an idea that long predated Freud, dreams had symbolism. Things in dreams were often not what they seemed to be, but rather symbols for other things. Freud believed that literature and fairy tales and stories to children and the like carried certain universal themes, certain aspects of unconscious struggles, and certain preoccupations of our unconscious mind. And Freud had a lot to say about religion. For instance, he viewed a large part of of the idea of finding a singular, all-powerful God as seeking out a father figure that some of us never had during development. What I want to spend the rest of the class on is the scientific assessment of Freud. So what I did was, so far as I've told you what Freud had to say in broad outline, I then want to take the time to consider whether or not we should believe this and how well it fits with our modern science. But before doing so, I'll take questions for a few minutes. Do people have any questions about Freud or Freud's theories? Yes?
So would a child who did not grow up in a two-parent family lack the Oedipus complex and other normal stages of development?
It's an excellent question. The question is that the conflicts and psychosexual development that Freud describes is always assumes that a child has a mother and a father, one of each, in a certain sort of familial structure. And the question then is, what if a child was raised by a single parent, for example? What if a child was never breastfed, but fed from the bottle from the start? And Freudians have had problems with this. Freud was very focused on the family life of the people he interacted with, which is rather upper-class Europeans. And these sort of questions would have been difficult for Freud to answer. I imagine that what a Freudian would have to say is you would expect systematic differences. So you would expect a child who just grew up with a mother, or just grew up to be a father, to be in some sense psychologically damaged by that, failing to go through the normal psychosexual stages. Yes? The question is, do modern psychoanalysts still believe that women do not have superegos? Freud was, as you're pointing out, Freud was notorious for suggesting that women were morally immature relative to men. I think Freud would say that women had superegos. They're just not the sort of sturdy ones that men have. I think psychoanalysts and psychoanalytic scholars right now would be mixed. Some would maintain that there really are deep sex differences. Others would want to jettison that aspect of Freudian theory. Yes?
You define sublimation as being a displacement. Does that make it sort of a subgroup of displacement?
Well, what sublimation is, a lot of these, it's a good question. The question is to sort of what is sublimation? How does it relate to the other defense mechanisms? A lot of defense mechanisms involve taking a desire and turning it. Now, what displacement...
I just want to point something out. This is like an introduction to psychology class at Yale. So the students that we're hearing in the background are most likely young, like 18, 19 years old. This is like an entry-level class to psychology. This was recorded 16 years ago. Does it strike you guys? And I know this is Yale, so you're going to say this is the Ivy Leagues. This is what it should be like. But we recently watched a class at Harvard. Who was it, the Harvard spy stream, where we went into a class at Harvard and we listened to the class? Do you guys hear the difference between this professor and the class we watched at Harvard? And the students that are asking questions in this class and the students that we saw at Harvard? Because, and by the way, the people that were on the panel in the Harvard class were also Harvard alumni. They were recent alumni. Does it strike you guys that 16 years ago, people sounded a lot smarter than they do now, based on the class we saw at Harvard, which was like an embarrassing level of retardation? So this was 16 years ago. This video is old. The class we watched at Harvard was like, what was it, a month or two ago? Well, that's terrifying.
It does is it takes it from you to her. Like, I'm angry at you, but maybe that's forbidden for some reason, so I'll be angry at her. What projection does is takes a desire from me and then puts it on somebody else heading outwards. And what sublimation does is it just gives up the details and keeps the energy. So you stay up, you know, your roommate stays up all night working. And you say to your roommate, for instance, that's just because you haven't had sex in a long time and you want to have sex, so you devote all your energy to your math exam. And then you say, that's sublimation. I learned that in intro psych. And your roommate may be very pleased. One more question. Yes?
What kind of evidence is there for like cross-cultural validity?
The question is, which is related to the issue, extending the issue of the two-parent versus one-parent family, is to what extent are these notions validated cross-culturally? And that's such a good question, I'm going to defer it, I'm going to talk about it in a few minutes, because that speaks to the issue of the scientific assessment of Freud. So I'm going to try to get to your question in a little bit. Freudian theory is now, at this point in time, extremely controversial. And there's a lot of well-known criticisms and attacks on Freud. This is just actually an excellent book on the memory wards by Frederick Crews, and Frederick Crews is one of the strongest and most passionate critics of Freud. And the problems with Freud go like this. There are two ways you could reject a theory. There are two problems with a scientific theory. One way you could reject a theory is that it could be wrong. So suppose I have a theory that the reason why some children have autism, a profound developmental disorder, is because their mothers don't love them enough.
Or because of vaccines. Definitely not disavow.
It's a possible theory, it just turns out to be wrong. But another way, and so one way to attack and address a scientific theory is to view it as just to see whether or not it works. But there's a different problem a theory could have. A theory could be so vague and all-encompassing that it can't even be tested. And this is one of the main critiques of Freud. The idea could be summed up by a quotation from the physicist Wolfgang Pauli. And Pauli was asked his opinion about another physicist. And Pauli said this: that guy's work is crap. He's not right. He's not even wrong. And the criticism about Freud is that he's not even wrong. The issue of vagueness is summarized in a more technical way by the philosopher Karl Popper, who introduced the term of falsifiability. The idea of falsifiability is that what distinguishes science from non-science is that scientific predictions make strong claims about the world, and these claims are of a sort that they could be proven wrong. if they couldn't be proven wrong, they're not interesting enough to be science. So for example, within psychology, the sort of claims we'll be entertaining throughout the course include claims like damage to the hippocampus causes failures of certain sorts of memory. Or everywhere in the world, men, on average, want to have more sexual partners than women. Or exposure to violent television tends to make children themselves more violent. Now, are they true or are they false? Well, we'll talk about that. But the point here is they can be false. They're interesting enough that they can be tested. And as such, they might be wrong, but they graduate to the level of a scientific theory. This should be contrasted with non-scientific programs, and the best example of a non-scientific program is astrology. So the problem with astrological predictions is not that they're wrong, it's that they can't be wrong. They're not even wrong. I got my horoscope for today on the web.
Horoscopes are not the best way to do this.
A couple of negative aspects could make you a little finicky for the next few days. Okay, I want to watch for that. The presence of both Mars and Venus suggests you want to box everything into a neat, ordered, structured way, but keeping a piece of jade or carnelian close will help you keep in touch with your fun side. And starting this morning, I got for my wife a little piece of jade, and I have been sort of in touch with my fun side. The problem is, a few days aren't going to go by and say, God, that was wrong. It can't be wrong. It's just so vague. I got a better horoscope from The Onion, actually. Riding in a golf cart with snow cone in hand, you'll be tackled by 2 police officers this week after matching a composite caricature of a suspected murderer. Now, that's a good prediction, because wow, if it turns out to be true, I'm going to say those guys really know something. It's falsifiable. Arguably, Freud fails the test, because Freudian theory is often so vague and flexible that it can't really be tested in any reliable way. A big problem of this is a lot of Freudian theory is claimed to be validated in the course of psychoanalysis. So when you ask people, why do you believe in Freud? They won't say, oh, because of this experiment, this data set, and that data set. What they'll say is, the Freudian theory proves itself in the course of psychoanalysis, the success of psychoanalysis. But it's unreliable. I mean, the problem is, say, Freud says to a patient, you hate your mother. The patient says, wow, that makes sense. Freud says, I'm right. Freud says, you hate your mother. The patient says, no, I don't want to terrible, that's disgusting. Freud says, your anger shows this idea is painful for you, you've repressed it from going, I am right. And the problem is, the same sort of dynamic plays itself out even in the scientific debate back and forth. So Freudian psychologists, I'm putting Freud here, but what I mean is well-known defenders of Freud, will make some claims like, adult personality traits are shaped by the course of psychosexual development, all dreams are disguised wish fulfillment, psychoanalysis is the best treatment for mental disorders. Scientists will respond, I disagree, there's little or no evidence supporting those claims, and the Freudian response is, your rejection of ideas shows that they are distressing to you. This is because I am right. And this is often followed up. Seriously enough, you have deep psychological problems. And now I don't want to caricature Freudians. A lot of Freudians have tried and made a research program of extending their ideas scientifically, bringing them to robust scientific tests. But the problem is, when you make specific falsifiable predictions, they don't always do that well. So for instance, there's no evidence that oral and anal characteristics, the personality characteristics I talked about being needy versus being stingy, relate in any interesting way to weaning or toilet training. And there's been some efforts cross-culturally, to go back to the question this young man asked before, looking at cross-cultural differences in toilet training and weaning, which are really big differences, to see if they correspond in any interesting way to personality differences, and there's been no good evidence supporting that. Similarly, Freud had some strong claims about sexuality for why some people are straight and others are gay. These have met with very little empirical support. And the claim that psychoanalysis proves itself by its tremendous success in curing mental illness is also almost certainly not true. For most, maybe not all, but for most psychological disorders, there are quicker and more reliable treatments than psychoanalysis. And there's considerable controversy as to whether the Tony Soprano method of insight, where you get this insight and this discovery, oh, now I know, makes any real difference in alleviating symptoms such as anxiety disorders or depression. This is why there's often a sticker shock when people go to a university psychology department, where they say, look, hey, so I'm in how can I take classes on Freud? Who's your expert on Freud? And the truth is, Freudian psychoanalysis is almost never studied inside psychology departments. Not the cognitive or developmental side, not the clinical side. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, even the people who do study Freud within psychology departments do so critically. Very few of them would see themselves as a psychoanalytic practitioner or as a Freudian psychologist. Freud lives on, both in a clinical setting and in a university, but Freud at Yale, for instance, is much more likely to be found in the history department or the literature department than in the psychology department. And this is typical enough. But despite all of the sour things I just said about Freud, the big idea, the importance of the dynamic unconscious, remains intact. We will go over and over and over again, different case studies, where some really interesting aspects of mental life prove to be unconscious. Now, there's one question, I'm actually going to skip over this for reasons of time, and just go to some examples of the unconscious in modern psychology. So, here's a simple example of the unconscious in modern psychology. Language understanding. So when you hear a sentence like, John thinks that Bill likes him, in a fraction of a second, you realize that this means that John thinks that Bill likes John. If you heard the sentence, John thinks that Bill likes himself, in a fraction of a second, you would think that it means John thinks that Bill likes Bill. And as we will get to when we get to the lecture on language, this is not conscious. You don't know how you do this. You don't even know that you are doing this, but you do it quickly and instinctively. So much of our day-to-day life can be done unconsciously. There are different activities you can do. Driving, chewing gum, shoelace tying, where if you're good enough at them, if you're expert enough at them, you don't know you're doing them. I was at a party a few years ago for a friend of mine, and we ran out of food. So he said, I'll just go pick up some food. An hour later, he was gone. Still gone, it was supposed to be around the corner. And we called him up on his cell phone. And he said, oh, I got on the highway and I drove to work. He works like an hour away. We got on the highway to drive. And some version of these things happen all the time. Maybe more surprising, Freud's insight that our likes and dislikes are due to factors that we're not necessarily conscious of has a lot of empirical support from research into social psychology, for example. So for instance, here's one finding from social psychology. If somebody goes through a terrible initiation to get into a club, they'll like the club more. You might think they'd like it less because people do terrible things.
That's true.
But actually, hazing is illegal, but a remarkably successful tool.
Exactly. Hazing is a remarkably successful tool. Exactly. You like the club more once you undergo the hazing, once you earn it.
The more you pay for something, the more you like it.
True.
And the more pain you go through to get something, the more you like it.
True.
From the standpoint of politics, for instance, if you want loyal people in a political campaign, do not pay them. If you pay them, they'll like you less. If they volunteer, they'll like you more. And we'll talk about why. There's different theories about why. But my point right now is simply that people don't necessarily know this, but still they're subject to this. Another example is some weird studies done in a discipline of social psychology known as terror management, which involves subliminal death primes. The idea of subliminal death primes is this. You sign up for your human subjects requirement, and then they put you in front of a computer screen. And then they tell you, oh, just sit in front of the computer screen and we'll ask you some questions. And then the questions come out, and they're questions like, how much do you love your country? What do you think of Asians? What do you think of Jews? What do you think of blacks? What do you think of vegetarians? What do you think of people's political views? Different from yours. Here's the gimmick. What you don't know is on that computer screen, words are being flashed. Like that. But they're being flashed so fast it looks like that. You don't see anything. Words like corpse, dead, dying. The flashing of these subliminal words, subliminal meaning a fancy term, meaning below the level of consciousness, you don't know you're seeing them, has dramatic effects on how you answer those questions. People exposed to death primes become more nationalistic, more patriotic, less forgiving of other people, less liking of other races and people from other countries. Again, the explanation for why this is so is something which we'll get to in another class. The point now is simply to illustrate that these sort of things can have, that things you aren't aware of can have an effect on how you think. The final example I'll give of this is a short demonstration. To do this, I'm going to cut the class in half at this point. So you'll be on this side of the class, the right side, my right, and this will be on the left side. And I simply want everybody to think about somebody you love. So think about somebody you love, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mom, your dad. Think about somebody you love. Just think about somebody you love. Okay. Now, on this screen is going to be instructions, but I want to give the instructions to this half of the class. So I'm going to ask everybody in this half of the class, please either turn your head or shut your eyes. Okay? Teaching fellows too. Okay. And everybody on this half, obey. Okay, have everybody read that? Okay. Okay. Now, turn your head, this group. Now, this group, look at this. And take a moment. You don't have to do it on paper, but take a moment to do it in your head. Each group had instructions. Some people might have seen both instructions. Follow the instructions you got for you. Now, this was research done by Norbert Schwartz, and here's the question I want you to ask yourself. How much do you like this person? And here's the effect. Half of you were asked to list 3 features of the person. Half of you were asked to list 10. The finding, which is not a subtle finding, is that liking goes up in the 3 group and liking goes down in the 10 group. And here's why. I have to think about 3 positive features of somebody. So, I think of my girlfriend. I have a girlfriend. I think of my girlfriend. But, oh, she's smart, she's beautiful, and she's kind. Good. What do I think of her? Pretty good. Smart, beautiful, kind. Smart, beautiful. Oh, yeah. But the problem, now Schwartz is clever, though. He says, listen, the other group gets 10 positive features. Smart, beautiful, kind, really nice, good cook. Punctual. Smart. No, I mentioned that. The problem is, nobody has 10 positive features. And the effect of being asked to do 10 positive features is people find this hard. And then those people ask, how much do you like this person? Say, couldn't really make it that 10. I guess I don't like them very much. Now, the point of this illustration, again, is that it shows that you don't know this. Subjects who are asked to do 10 positive features and then later rank the person lower, and then ask, why did you rank the person lower? Don't say, because you told me to list 10. Typically, we are oblivious to these factors that change our points, what we like and what we dislike. And this is, in fact, a substantial and important part of the study of psychology, and particularly, for instance, the study of racial and sexual prejudice.
Oh!
Where one of the big findings from social psychology, and we'll devote almost an entire lecture to this, is that people have strong views about other races that they don't know about, and that they don't know control their actions. So to some extent, this rounds out Freud, because to some extent, the particulars of Freud are, for the most part, have been rejected. But the general idea of Freud has actually been so successful, both in the study of scientific psychology and in our interpretation of everyday life, that to some extent Freud's been a victim of his own success. We tend to underestimate the importance of Freudian thought in everyday life because he's transformed our worldview to such an extent that it's difficult for us to remember that there's any other way to think about it. So to some extent, he's been a victim of his own success. We have time for some further questions about Freud and about scientific implications of Freud. I took a class once on how to teach when I was a graduate student. And I just remember two things from this class. One thing is never grade in red pen. People don't like that. The second thing is never ask any questions, because presumably it's very frightening to say any questions, and people find it's intimidating. I'm supposed to ask, what are your questions? So, what are your questions? Yes, I'm back. Sorry. Did Freud believe in? Medication. Freud had it's a good question. The question was, did Freud believe in medication? Medication, of course, being a major theme of how we deal with certain disorders now, particularly depression and anxiety disorders. On the one hand, Freud made its start as a neuroscientist. Freud studied the mind and the brain and was intensely interested in the neural basis of thought and behavior. But the answer to your question in the end is no. Although Freud was very sensitive to the brain basis of behavior, Freud was totally convinced that the method through which to cure disorders like depression and anxiety would not be medication, but rather through the sort of talk therapy and insight. Moreover, modern therapists, including some people who aren't psychoanalytically defined, will say, look, these drugs are all well and good, but what they do is they mask the symptoms. So if you have panic attacks, say, it's true the drugs might make the panic attacks go away, but the panic attacks are actually not your real problem. And by making them go away, you don't get to the root of your problem. So the answer is both Freud and modern-day psychoanalysts would think that medications are substantially overused in the treatment of mental disorders. Yes? The question is, what about research on dreams? Dreams is such a fun topic that I'm going to devote half a class to sleeping in dreams. So for instance, I will answer the question, what is the most common dream? I will also answer the question, who thinks about sex more in dreams, men or women? And what proportion of, there's so many great questions I will answer. Dreams from a Freudian standpoint, there's been some evidence that dreams often do have some relationship to what you're thinking about and worrying about through the day. But the strong Freudian view about symbolism and wish fulfillment has not been supported by the study of dreams. What are your other questions? Yes, whoever Eric is pointing to. Purple shirt. Yes. The Electra complex? The Electra complex is the penis envy story. Freud developed, this is a crude summary, but Freud developed the Oedipal complex. You know, mom, I love mom, hey dad. And then it's as if somebody reminded him, Sigmund, there are also women. Oh yeah. And that story I told you with the penises and the penis envy and the replacement is a sort of a very shortened version of the Electra complex. I think it's fair to say that the Electra complex was a sort of add-on to the main interest of Freud, the Oedipal complex. One more, please. Yes?
So are women stuck in that stage for the rest of their life, according to Freud? Like in that envy, penis envy, or does he not continue to explain?
According to Freud, it's not a fixation in the stage in the same sense as an oral or anal stage. But yes, the claim that Freud would make is that the woman's discovery that she lacks the penis plays a fundamental role later on, determining her allegiances in life, and in fact her own sexual preferences and interests. So it's not the sort of thing that affects her just for a short period.
All right, I guess that's it. Hey, I actually really enjoyed that. Does this guy has other classes on there too? This guy apparently has taught a lot of classes on there. Huh. That might be one we want to watch. What motivates us? Sex. Anyway, I thought that was actually a really good introduction to Freud. I needed that. I haven't had a Freud review in a while. And so, you know what? What I learned today is we need to slow down on the understanding of how Freud made everything queer. Because it is very, very clear. I mean, it's like obvious, I think. Like, you know, we were watching the presentation earlier. There are a bunch of other queer, like Freudian Marxist things. I'm still unclear about how talking about the unconscious stuff that happens transformed into queer fuck off insanity. I mean, you can kind of see like the esoteric links, but that's what I want a little bit more clarification on. And so, I don't know. We'll probably watch some more stuff about this moving up. But we are going to be watching Century of the Self tomorrow, and I think it's going to be great. And I think that having that review of Freud is actually really helpful, and I think that it will make Century of the Self a little bit easier to watch. All right, that's it. I'm done. I'm leaving the internet now. I'm going to go do some work and clip some stuff and stuff like that. I will be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. I will have beer, and we'll watch Century of the Self, and we'll talk about it. All right, guys, that's all we have for tonight. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you here?
That's difficult to answer.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.